Penguin Audio presents Jim Morrison, Life, Death, Legend, by Stephen Davis. Read by Paul Michael. Introduction. He's been dead for decades, but he's still causing trouble. Jim Morrison was a mesmeric figure in the American 60s, a rebel poet and godhead in snakeskin and leather. He lived fast, died young, and left a less than exquisite corpse in Paris while hiding out from the law. In his prime, the writers and critics went nuts trying to do his weird mojo some measure of justice. One called him an angel in grace and a dog in heat. Jim was the greatest American rock star of his era and one of its most publicized celebrities. But, more than 3 decades later, his life and works have yet to yield all their secrets and enigmas. Jim Morrison tried to set the night on fire. As lead singer of The Doors, he was an acid evangelist on a suicide mission to deprogram his generation from what he saw as a prison-like conformity to social and sexual norms. He was a seer, an adept, a bard, a drunk, a bisexual omnivore. Jim styled his band erotic politicians and relentlessly urged his huge audience at the height of the dangerous 60s to break on through the doors of perception, to free themselves from robotic familial conditioning, to seek a higher, more aware consciousness. Doors concerts, throbbing with war dance rhythms and superheated intimacy, were as close to the experience of shamanic ritual as the rock audience ever got. The Doors captured the unrest and the menace that hung in the air of the late 60s like tear gas. And they did it with hypnotic cool. In the 6 years between 1965 and 1971, Jim Morrison wrote 100 songs, recorded 7 platinum albums, wrote and published 4 editions of poems, made 3 films, recorded his poetry, wrote screenplays, and filled dozens of notebooks with verse and notations. He played more than 200 concerts with The Doors. He established himself as a sex icon and the major American rock star of the 60s. He violated all of Puritan America's sexual taboos and, in a frenetic burst of political energy, even threatened the vindictive Nixon administration with his blatant invitations to protest and revolt. Jim Morrison, as it turns out, was much more important than anyone realized at the time. Critically dismissed as a has-been bozo Dionysus before his death, Morrison's poetic visions stayed on the radio for more than 30 years, and on into the new century. They became the classic texts of classic rock, reaching out to generations beyond the one that first understood the deepest meanings, the organic unity, and the transcendent qualities of his greatest work. Jim Morrison was the last incarnation of that quintessential late romantic figure, the demonically aroused poet shaking with rage at his world and his contemporaries, a prophet with the terrible eyes and rigid features, clad in black leather, with wickedly twisted hands that nevertheless cried out for help. He was arguably the major poet to emerge from the turmoil of the legendary American 60s. Decades later, Jim Morrison has materialized as the true avatar of his age. His words are burned into the brains of 3 American generations: the emergency telegram of Break On Through, the visionary cadences of L.A. Woman, and the mysterious whispered verses of Riders on the Storm. His voice echoes on classic rock stations from coast to coast. His image haunts dorm walls everywhere, emblazoned Jim Morrison, American Poet, 1943 to 1971. The Doors' album sales, as of this writing, are over 50 million units, and climbing.